Welcome to Between the Lines, where we explore the intersection of local and national issues. I'm your host, Eben Diskin, editor of the Townie, and today we'll be talking about civic engagement in both local politics and the activities and festivals we enjoy around town. And we are joined today by Jared Eigerman. Jared is a land use attorney in private practice. He served on the Newburyport Zoning Board of Appeals from 2013 through 2014, and then the City Council from 2014 to 2020. The last 2 years as Council President. He was reappointed to the Zoning Board in May. And sitting next to him, we have Kim Hutchins, a child and family psychotherapist and 9-year resident of Newburyport. She serves on boards and committees for several local organizations, including PlumFest, Pride, Port and Youth Recreation Foundation, and the Mayor's Mental Health Task Force. Thanks for being here, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for sitting inside with me on a beautiful day. So civic engagement can take many forms, especially in Newburyport, and from volunteering to on things like Yankee Homecoming to attending city council meetings and voting and staying engaged with what's going on in City Hall. Based on your personal and professional experiences, do you guys think Newburyporters are pretty engaged?
You want to go first?
I don't think so, actually. In general, I mean, based on the number of people that we have in the town, I think there are a few people that are engaged in a lot of things, in my opinion, and I think there are some very specific things that a lot of people are engaged in.
Yeah, no, I agree. It really is not a lot of people in percentage terms, and I do think it's if you talk to old timers. That's changed. It's a lot fewer. I mean, if you look even at voter participation back in the 1950s, I mean, it was really, really high, and also more organizations that have kind of gone by the wayside, like the League of Women Voters chapter here used to be really active, and I just never hear from them again.
What do you think has caused that decline in activity? Not just the League of Women Voters, but across the board. I mean, what do you? We don't have answers necessarily, but any ideas?
I think culturally, I mean, just using common sense from our own experience, people have changed their focus. They because of media, especially electronic media, they seem to be more easily distracted by other things than what's right in their town. So it's kind of a reversal, I would say, of what things were decades ago. I mean, I wasn't an adult decades ago, but that's my impression.
Do you think maybe people are paying more attention to what's going on nationally because it's so much more accessible than
absolutely,
it was?
Because they're bombarded with it.
Right.
Yeah.
I think especially now, actually.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you think people would care about what goes on in your backyard affects you more directly most of the time than what's going on in Washington. So whether you're in the 50s or you're now, you would think that people would care more about and be more fired up about what's happening in Newburyport, but I think there's a tendency now to kind of get distracted, like you said, by national news and get kind of riled up by national news and even kind of radicalized one way or the other, but you're almost bypassing everything that's local in favor of what's going on nationally, because it's so much easier to kind of attach your identity to something that's hyper polarized.
Yeah, well, we should talk about identity later in this talk, because identity politics, I personally think, has been a problem rather than sort of just taking things as they come, neighbor to neighbor.
Locally, even, you mean?
Yeah, locally too. I mean, I just don't think it hasn't been terribly helpful in my experience for people to start from an identity. I'm a this, I'm a that, and therefore, on the local level, you're dealing with really day-to-day meat and potatoes things like making sure we're able to teach foreign languages because we have the budget in the schools at middle school. We're paving the streets. And it's nonpartisan by law. And it's a good idea because we can't really do much about the big stuff, and that's why it's sort of ironic that people are spending more time on the national or international issues. I understand they're important. I'm not minimizing their importance, but there isn't much we can do about it. I mean, but you can do a lot. about getting your street paved.
Local, right.
Right.
I think that it's really interesting that I can't remember the exact percentages, I'm not a numbers person, but way more people are involved in the larger political,
Yeah.
than the larger issues than local. And if you look at like special elections, we get the smallest number of turnout, and then local elections are a
Yeah.
little more, and then the
That's funny,
national
'cause
elections are.
Because people get engaged with what they identify with. And you would think that people would identify with what's in their backyard, but it seems more and more that they identify with these bigger national issues that are almost like tempting you and trying to coerce you into identifying with one group or another group. That's not just, I don't know.
No, just a quick thing to say about that. I think that there, if we locally are looking at the larger issues, it's more I'd say choosing a side, if that's like the right thing to say, or supporting something versus locally you would be volunteering and getting involved in those things, which is different things. Supporting and volunteering is a lot different.
Right.
Volunteering is
Yeah, I have a
It's
very
more
similar viewpoint. I mean,
supporting.
I would put it this way: it's that if you get all riled up and involved in national politics, you can't really problem solve. You have to take a side and say, and protest.
post about it, right? Or
Yeah,
protest,
or whatever. But on a local level, what's satisfying, I'm sure to Kim as well as a volunteer, is you're trying to solve, and you have the ability to do that. We have no influence really on solving what's going on in Congress. We'd like to, but we don't. But you absolutely, whatever the issue is, whatever side you want to be on, by being active in some way, at least by being an educated voter maybe, you actually can get a solution.
Yeah.
So that's very
And you
satisfying.
can see the results
Yeah.
day to day around town, which you
Around local.
think would motivate people to get out there and get involved.
Right.
I mean, Kim, you have self-identified as having chronic volunteerism.
Yeah.
So what motivates you to get involved?
It's interesting. I really don't think about that very much. I'm involved in so many things, and I enjoy. I don't really hear about a lot of local things that I won't help out with. Like I love that. I really. I love it, and but I was thinking about it, and I don't remember when I think I was just born this way, honestly. Like I didn't have anybody in my family or nobody was like telling me like this is important. Like I think it was what was the organization that said like the civics before self or service before self. It's like
I don't
some
know.
type of a
Like the JCs or
yeah,
something.
like an organization. And I don't know that I would go that far in terms of like service before self, but I feel like I've always volunteered since I was very young. I always wanted to like the little helping neighbor, like if someone needed something, I just would go help them do it or get help to go do it.
Part of the personality thing.
I think
But,
so, yeah. I think it's just how people are born a lot of times, unless something really drastic happens, like when people lose somebody in their life, they'll get involved in the cause of why,
Sure.
Potentially why that person, passed away or something like that. But yeah, I love being involved and helping. I do a lot of work with mental health and children's stuff in particular, but also a bunch of other, I've never really said no to helping somebody.
Don't say no to anything. We need Kim to help out.
I just will help
can't
out.
say no.
Yeah, no, I'm not
Can't
good.
do it.
I'm not good at it.
Yeah. So being involved in a lot of events around town, what are some organizations that you feel could benefit from a lot more support, and what do you think have a robust base of support, and why do you think there's a disparity, and why do some organizations have an easy time attracting followers and supporters, and why do some struggle? I know that's like 7 questions in one.
That's a lot of questions.
Start where you
Yeah,
wanna start
I
for.
mean, yeah, I'll see what I can do on that. So I think that that the organizations that need a lot of work, like they need a lot of time and commitment to like an ongoing thing. I think people tend to be involved more in things where I don't want to say a one-off, but like they have a certain thing that they can do, and it's not a long-term commitment, maybe for some people. I also think it's interesting that there are like only 20% of people in Newburyport have children, which I didn't realize until a few years back, actually. And I think that there's that sort of influences who gets involved in what. Like I don't really know if there's a place where numbers are published, but if you look at like the Preservation Society, I mean, we have a lot of people that are retired in this town. If you look at the organizations, the nonprofits like that. I think they are more so, you're not going to necessarily to an event and like running the event for the day like with kids and like that. I think that it's a little bit different for people that go and do things on their own time, maybe their own. I don't know. I'm trying to remember the other 6 questions.
Well, so we talked before about like Pride, how you helped out with Pride,
Oh, yeah.
and how that doesn't have as difficult of a time to getting supporters,
right.
getting people to donate, whatever, as like PlumFest.
Right.
And
True.
that. So why do you think that is? Where do you think the difference is there, having been involved with both in some capacity?
I think Pride is a very personal thing for
Yeah.
people. I mean, that's how people are identify, and it's a really important personal issue for people, which I think helps them want to be involved and helps the people that love them want to be involved. So like
Right.
that we
Even
don't,
if you're not part of the community yourself, you might know someone who is,
Yes,
and
so
it
you wanna
resonates with you.
support them. Almost
Yeah.
like it's a bit of a marginalized. So like you want to go help that. We don't have as much difficulty. I mean, we certainly still don't have millions of people that are wanting to volunteer, but we definitely have more. The PlumFest, a lot of people are really interested in the PlumFest. It's an awesome island-wide music event. People love it. It's also a charity, which at the beginning I don't know that everybody knew about, but it is a charity, and we give lots of money. Boys and Girls Club for their music room and recording studio. I think people like the event more than they like helping with the event. In that case,
Right.
they want to go there for sure.
Yeah.
Like thousands of people go, and so I think, and we'll talk about strategies later maybe. But I think that for some it just depends. Like we have a lot of people, for instance, that we have a lot of bands. Lots of people want to volunteer. Nobody gets paid to be a band or a host in the PlumFest. A lot more bands are interested because it's their passion, kind of like it's a personal sort of thing that they
Right.
that identify with, and also could get them some visibility too. So there's like I think reasons
Sure.
for.
Yeah. So you think emotional resonance, things that talking about Pride, things that people can identify with, that strikes a more emotional chord is more a
Yeah,
cause.
if I could jump in, because that's exactly the word that's been in my head, is emotion. As and I've learned this, as I came into middle age. It took me a couple of decades, but most people are responding emotionally. I'm sure as a psychotherapist, you would know that better than I do. But we're all taught in school. Well, here are the reasons, and you write an essay, and you give your evidence, and you have and all that stuff. But most people are reacting emotionally, and so I haven't been involved in Pride, but I remember when I was on the city council, we already had a very strong human rights commission. I mean, Newburyport back in the 80s was really ahead of the curve and had a commission that of appointees to make sure that the community is welcoming and diverse, and that we do not tolerate discrimination. So I want to say 8 or 9 years ago, we updated it at the city council, because it's written right into the statute. It's not just on a website. It's in the city code, and that it's our official policy not to discriminate against protected groups. And we broadened the class of protected groups. For example, over time, there are more protected groups than there were back in the 80s that we recognized are vulnerable and need to be named. We didn't want people to be discriminated against because of where the source of income is. Say they're on, vouchers or welfare. That's unacceptable in Newburyport. But the point of all this is to tell you that people, that kind of hit a nerve, and there were people very emotional about it and got involved, didn't realize that we already had something in place. And I think the energy dissipated quickly. Why? Because they realized it was not controversial, that 11 out of 11 city councilors were absolutely on board, and it passed unanimously. Same thing with gender diversity and all that stuff. It's not something that we counselors fought over ever. It was just stipulated. Because, and that's what I was alluding to earlier, is that sometimes we get these sort of national issues that come in, because very much so, take for example, gay rights are under attack, nationally in many states and by our federal government, no question. So, of course, people want to say something about that, but whether it's good or bad, at the local level, there isn't much we can do. You know, we have our policies in place, and Newburyport is doing the right thing, and we do not tolerate discrimination and so on. But really, where the effort is in politics anyway, local politics, and I would also argue in local activism, are things that maybe aren't that glamorous. You know, they're not that fraught. They may be boring. I understand that, but somebody has to do it, and you have to, put it's work. It's not just fun and games. It's you got to be paying attention, and you got to be smart and thoughtful and elbow grease.
Right. I mean, talk about things that get people out on the street. Was the protests, I think last month, the No Kings protest at the Mall, and I don't know what the numbers are on that, but there was a great turnout, huge turnout.
Yeah.
And I mean, you can argue about the effectiveness of protests and whether they move the needle or not, but like you can't argue that got people off the sidelines and out protesting and
for sure.
really involved because there was an issue that resonated with them emotionally.
And I'm not demeaning that. I'm just saying that. And I'm saying that's human nature. I got it. And there was some value for, Newburyport as a community to register, or a large number of Newburyports to register its position on this. But I'm just thinking, day to day as neighbors, living in this community. I mean, the way I put it to people, because there are people that I highly respect who are very libertarian. They're not really interested in collaboration. But the problem seems to be it's hard not to work with other people as much as whether you want to or not. We're kind of all in this together.
Right.
You live next door to people, you're sharing streets, you're sharing schools, everybody's got to deal with each other. We're not living off in the woods. So I guess I would hope that there would be more involvement in that sort of day-to-day neighborly stuff.
Right.
Than just being really, upset about a national issue, as important as it is.
Right. And the national thing, the protest, that's also a sense of community. I think people go to that protest and they feel like they're part of a community at that event.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to think of like what would a local equivalent be of that for a local issue. Something that is, I mean, I don't know, it has to be polarizing, but something that people can really rally around. I mean, the rec center was a big one that people, it got polarizing, even though it had, majority support for sure.
Right.
Well, we're not the right people to interview about it, but because we're not the right age. But Yankee Homecoming is kind of an interesting study. So. My family's not old Newburyporters. My parents moved here in the 60s, and they were young. And they moved into a community where there was already all kinds of civic things going on, and old battles and, all kinds of stuff. Yankee Homecoming then was still rather new. And at the time, and I have, my mom was a pack rat, and I have the old programs, and you can find them at the library too. They're fascinating.
Oh, that's awesome.
What you see is it was very much a community event. Like kids would decorate their bikes, and they would be in the parade.
Right.
It wasn't just people from out of town, marching bands. And locals would have goofy, floats of their own, or dress up and have signs, and same thing with like the bean supper or pancake breakfast. All the events, it was more geared to just people getting together once a year,
Yeah.
and. I'm not saying that can be replicated. That's probably unrealistic, but it kind of shows the difference. Is that people? I think if you ask most Newburyporters now, they don't really think of Yankee Homecoming as sort of the local fair. They don't think of it that way. They think it was sort of like a tourism event.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's an
And
imposition.
that's
One of the
totally different than
festivals,
how
yeah.
it started. Yeah.
Right.
Am I? my
Yeah, no, I
recollection?
mean, Jim Roy, who was on the show for my first episode, we talked about Newburyport's gentrification. He wrote an article for me about Yankee Homecoming and why it's lost its luster and
Yeah.
needs revitalization one way or the other. And that was proved to be pretty controversial.
And there's an example of there's a local family, I think it's the LaCroix family, that has taken on, it's a charity, and they
Yeah.
they stepped up, just as Kim does in many things, and they do all the work because others won't, and the city doesn't really have the funding, to do it.
Yeah.
So, kudos to them. And what I say to people, if they don't like the way it's being run or they're not happy with it, well, then you need to volunteer. Go to the meetings.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah.
they're not going to bar the door, and go talk to LaCroix family and work with them and help them.
Right.
Yeah, no,
For
that's
sure.
that's a good resource. It's funny to see what gets attention, what gets people going, and what doesn't.
Yeah.
And I mean, as we were talking, the Pink House is another thing I can think of that is a relatively small issue. It's not just a house sitting on a marsh, but the governor was involved, the state senator was involved,
Yep.
and there's resounding consensus on that, and it was almost like a local versus federal government kind of fight, and that really resonated with people on an emotional level, for whatever reason, a nostalgic level. I mean, talk about taking home nostalgia.
That was
gets
very
people.
emotional. I went to an event at the Newburyport Preservation Trust where they gave an award to the activists, many of whom lived in Newbury. They're not Newburyporters per se. Even though it was a failed effort, it was a very emotional and noble effort.
Yeah,
And there was a lot of emotion in the room, including, one of the guys that grew up in that house, the family, even though it's been vacant for decades now. He
yeah,
came.
Bruce.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And his sister, his sister was in high school and was a babysitter for my family. So,
Oh, yeah.
so there's a lot of people that had a direct connection to that house, and that's a good example of something that's hyper local that you would think would get more attention.
Right. Yeah, and people, I think, were the Support the Pink House people did an extraordinary job of creating awareness too.
Yeah.
I think awareness is a big problem. People, especially with politics, people don't pay attention, and they don't know how it affects them. And then even things that do affect them, like the CSOs and the river and things like that.
Yeah.
It's kind of complex and dry, and you don't know how to kind of sink your teeth into it. The Pink House is something that's easy and everyone can identify with. They've all seen it. They've all taken pictures of it. They've all bought paintings of it.
Yeah.
And it's a little guy versus a Goliath situation, and that's something that resonates with people.
Yeah, I think people like those one-off, not one-off, but like something that's like a save the Pink House. They like something that they understand it. Like you're saying, I think sometimes it's more complicated. They don't know how they can help or what they can do. Like a specific ask is nice.
Yeah, and
the
that-
Pink
and that-
House was like, do this.
And that's understandable. I mean, again, people are busy, but people have always been busy. Like, so let's take the 20% of households that do have children. If their kids are involved in sports, especially, I mean, they're just totally consumed with taking their kids to sports, because that's changed too.
Right.
You don't just play, Amesbury anymore. You're driving to New York State,
Travel.
all this stuff.
Yeah.
That's because it's a business. But but that's also everybody has a choice. They're prioritizing their time.
Yeah.
So I guess what I would hope is that it's not realistic to have a participatory democracy, like the sort of dream where you poll everyone. You don't have a city council. You just send out like a survey on every question. That's not realistic, because people, they don't have time to get educated on everything. So instead, the system we have, which is pretty tried and true, is you elect 11 people and a mayor, and you're counting on them to do a good job. And if you hear something where you're worried they're going to mess it up, you should go and say so. But it seems to me the best way to sort of know that it is every 2 years there's an election for the council, every 4 years for the mayor. Like this year, this would be the time to put some effort in, just so you know that your representatives, the people that you're saying, okay, I'm going to give you a shot for 2 or 4 years to handle all this stuff, that it's the people you want, for whatever your criteria are.
Yeah.
But that would be a good place to focus, because you're just not going to have time, next year. But maybe if you could just pay attention just for a few weeks.
Right.
I think people are good at that. Like if it's something that's short term and then time limited and it's going to pass, like the Pink House, like you were saying. Like if you don't do it now, you're not going to be able to participate in it later, or like it could make a difference right now,
Yeah.
and they see some results.
Right.
Usually
I think
point
for the
out.
Pink House specifically, it's helpful to feel kind of with the protest, to feel part of a movement. And you feel like you're really representing a cause that you believe in on a personal level and can make a difference. And I want to swing over to politics a little bit, but first, Kim, how have you kind of made the decision to volunteer with the organizations that you volunteer with? And because there's a billion that you could, even though you say yes to everything, you don't volunteer on every board. So you know, PlumFest, Pride, Rec Center, you're involved in these things. What about those organizations specifically kind of drew you in? And I think that could be a good window to understanding why certain people are attracted to certain things and how can maybe we expand that.
Yeah. I think the things I'm mostly involved with are children and families and mental health stuff, because that's what I do for a career as well. I don't have any children though, and I'm involved in a lot of things for children here in town. I think I've always thought it was really important to help the younger generations, give them a chance, give them a good opportunities for the future. I was really involved in the rec center stuff,
right.
And I feel like the things that can make that can keep the community doing well and offer a lot for the people that live in the community are some things that I really like to be involved with. I like bringing people together and having it be something that makes a lasting difference for the future.
Right. Yeah. So today in the paper, Dave Rogers wrote an editorial about the 8% of residents that have enough free time on their hands to follow local politics intensely.
I saw that.
I'm inclined to think that number's probably fairly accurate in terms of people who really.
What was the
are
percent he
following.
gave?
8%.
Sounds
Intensely
about right.
was the word he used. That
Yeah, no,
really
that's
follow
about right.
everything.
That's about right.
So when it comes to politics, I think people here aren't super engaged. And Jared, if you agree with that or disagree with that, you can let me know. But why do we think that is?
There are various reasons, but I guess I'd sum it up as it's sort of a lack of understanding of the difference between local government and state and federal, which is money. If you want to be a state representative or a state senator, let alone a congressman, you need money, and that means you need someone behind you. You can't just be ringing doorbells of your neighbors and asking for their vote. It's very unlikely that's going to work. Whereas in local politics, it absolutely works. I mean, it really is. First of all, the pool is small. There was an election when I left in 2021. There were no opposed seats. Everybody just was automatically elected to the city council, 11 out of 11. Some of them new
Really?
people.
Really?
Like I left Ward 2. I didn't run again, and then the person who replaced me had no opponent. And that was a real low point for Newburyport, I would say. But
Yeah.
and I think part of that is a misunderstanding, because national politics and state politics are very nasty and expensive. Local politics, sure, there's lots of rhetoric and there grudges because there are humans involved, but the barriers to entry just aren't there. It really isn't that different from working for a charity. If you step up and get involved, you'll get somewhere.
So you think that what's keeping people from getting involved is a
distaste.
perception of there's just the nastiness about politics?
I think it's a distaste, and there is the one aspect of it that I think is true, is that unlike a charity or unlike a business, I'll give an anecdote to elucidate it, is if you're on a council or you're on a commission, say you volunteer on the zoning board, things come down to votes. You decide things by debate and vote. And that means there's going to be some conflict, and that it's not all kumbaya and we all agree. And many people are uncomfortable with that, including some elected officials. They never really are comfortable with that. The anecdote I would tell is I serve on some charities too, and I serve on a board for an outfit out of New York. And we were voting on a policy about funding, like an emergency slush fund for our directors. And the reason why I'm on this charity is I know the directors and I've been on it for a decade, and they're extremely efficient with their money. They take very low salaries, they deliver a lot of services to children, and all that. But from my experience in government, you have checks and balances. I'm used to that. Not because people are evil, but just because more eyes on the money makes sense. So I had expected that we would keep our policy where the board we'd have a conference call, like a Zoom call, and they'd say, hey, we're running low on funds. Will the board please release, $50,000 or whatever? Well, I was the only one who voted against a change of the policy where the directors could just do that automatically without giving notice to the board. Because my argument was, well, we can have a Zoom call on like 1 day's notice. Why do you need this immediate access? And there were certain people on the board who don't have a government background. They only have a background serving in charities or business where they're used to everything being unanimous. There's like consensus,
Right.
And when I voted no, it upset a couple of them. I mean, they were really visibly upset. They wanted me to change my vote. And I remember saying to them, but I lost. What do you care if I vote no? I gave my reasons and I lost. We rolled the dice and I came up, I
Because
lost.
conflict or dissent is uncomfortable.
Very uncomfortable for them. And so I understand that also is a barrier to people going
So
into
that could prevent
local
people from
politics,
running.
because you do have to give your reasons on the floor, whether you're a zoning board member acting as a quasi-judge on an application or as a city councilor on a policy.
Yeah.
You have to justify yourself, and some people may disagree with you, and that can be uncomfortable.
See, I think that's part of it, and I also think people are just afraid to fail. I think people care about the community. Maybe they grew up here, maybe they didn't. They have ideas about what's going on around town or in government, and they think they can make it better, but they are afraid of their inexperience. They're afraid that they're not qualified. It's imposter syndrome. It's maybe when I get up there, I'm not comfortable with public speaking. I am going to be found out to be of no value that I actually think I am. And I think that it could be part of it, because I think it's scary.
It could be. I mean, what I found is, especially in the first few years I was on the council, because there was a big turnover when I joined in 2014. And a lot of us, came from very diverse walks of life. So there was a new counselor like me, who was a professor of economics, and and I'm a land use attorney, and another guy is a specialist in HVAC equipment. But all those skill sets, first of all, they did come up in various ways as helpful, for a business at city level, including HVAC, by the way. But the number one thing, really to boil it down, is the 11 city councilors, especially, they're just trying to be fair. That's really it. I mean, like we talked about, there are certain issues that people get really exercised about. Maybe they're not really paying attention, but like when I was the Ward 2 councilor, I dealt with parking a lot. Parking, there are certain things that set people off and you get big crowds. Parking, dogs. There's a third one, but I can't think of it right now.
The sidewalks.
Yeah, it could be sidewalks, but definitely parking and dogs. Anything to do with dogs. And people are going to be unhappy. So they get all riled up and they come in and they say, this is a crime against humanity because you're making it, resident-only parking on this block. And it's an outrage, and they're really upset. You're counting on the 11 counselors as a group to say, listen, we have hundreds of issues going on here. We can't give everybody everything. So you got to just bear with us here. We're going to make a judgment on whether to do on-street parking for residents or not, and then we got to move on to the next thing. Someone's going to be unhappy no matter what. We're going to be as fair as we can, and we got to move on. And that really is the best skill of any city councilor, in my opinion, is to be able to make a fair decision and move on to the next thing.
What do you think about the veil that exists between the city council, city hall, and voters in terms of awareness? And city council meetings are open to the public, and people can come and make their comments. And there's a core kind of group of people who go to these meetings all the time, and they take notes, and they have newsletters, and they disseminate that information to the people that subscribe to those newsletters. But that group of people, you could call them the 8%, are very engaged, and they go to the meetings and they pay attention. But the broader population of voters isn't so engaged. I mean, I have the numbers here. There's 15,000 registered voters. There's 50% turnout in the last mayoral election, which was considered strong.
That's considered really high.
Yeah.
I know.
So it means 50% of registered voters aren't voting
At all. Yeah.
And the rec center had 4,100 people voting, which is less than a third of registered voters.
Yeah, disappointing.
Despite how heavily it was publicized,
Exactly.
which, it's not a city council or mayoral election, it's a single issue election, but also,
Right, it was a special, yeah.
I've never seen so many
yeah.
laws
No,
signed
let's
for
talk
it.
about the veil. That's another thing.
Yeah.
So I was talking earlier about why you might even want to run, or you may want to write a letter or an email to Mayor Reardon and say, hey, I hear you have an opening on such and such a commission. I'll pitch in, and I'm encouraging people to not think twice about it. Go ahead. I mean, you are qualified. If you can be fair and a decent person, that's pretty much it. But now, being at least knowing what's going on with your city council, I mean, I'm realistic. People are busy. They can't keep tabs. 8% people are riled up, about this stuff, and they read newsletters and they're really following it. So that's why I was saying maybe the best way is to at least have, first of all, input on who you put into office. So maybe just pay attention every 2 years
Sure.
to who you put in.
Yeah.
But then also, like I say, it's not like state or federal government. Like I don't have, I don't have a phone number for, Senator Warren. I mean, I wish I did, but I don't. But for all the city councilors in little dinky Newburyport, I mean, at most, they live on the island. They're not far away. You'll probably run into them at Market Basket because they got to eat. It's what I'm saying is it's totally different.
Yeah.
There really should not be, and there isn't, as far as the councilors are concerned, a barrier. They're incredibly accessible.
Right.
And because we're just neighbors, and you're the old term select board or selectman or select person is, we don't have that because we're not a town, but that was a really good concept because you're just selecting. You're saying, all right, you guys are it. Tag, you're it. And you're going to be running it for a while, but you're just us.
Right.
You're just a select group of us.
Well, I don't think there's any barriers being erected by the city council.
Oh
or the
no,
city
no.
hall.
But I do
there's-
think people think of it as an other. They think of their local government as an
Right.
other.
There's a distance.
And there's a distance. And what I'm saying is that's really artificial in your head.
Right.
Because there is absolutely a physical and a formal distance from state and federal elected officials, not with the local people.
Right.
Like you can go into any meeting, you can call into any meeting, you can reach out to
Yeah.
people all the time. But I think
Yeah.
it's more from our perspective, us meaning the community versus the council, that we feel like there's that. I don't, I feel like
Yeah.
we feel like that they're doing their thing and we should not sort of
Sure.
bother it or whatnot. I feel like it's our own sort of perception of it.
And it was just it doesn't take that much effort, really. I mean, think about it. Think how many texts and emails you send in a day, up to hundreds, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's your kids or strangers or tradespeople or whatever, you could do that with your city councilor too. You also have the ability, as I said, to buttonhole them at this grocery store, have a conversation with them, and that's why I think there's more hope for local government being human than state and federal, because absolutely there's a tendency to demonize and label. Like I heard that city councilor blah 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 voted no on this, therefore he must hate all blah blah blahs.
Right.
On a state and federal level, you may be stuck because you'll never meet that person.
No.
But you can kind of call them to it. You can meet them and evaluate them yourself and argue with them. Have a discussion.
Just ask a question. Yeah, ask the question about
Just hang out in the by the deli section in Market Basket. until he
Even if
shows up,
even if
and
they
then-
wanted to
Eat
duck
someday.
you, they can't.
Yeah. It's too small of a town.
It's too small a place.
Yeah, and to me, it's awareness is the issue. Like I know people on city council are open
Yeah.
to talking, people city hall, whatever, and people who are interested voters would have no issue getting in touch with the city councilors. The issue to me is non-engaged residents who care about the community and would be interested to hear what's going on, but they're just not their ears not to the ground. They're not going to the meetings. They don't happen to subscribe to one of the newsletters that are written by the people who do.
Yeah.
They read the daily news, but maybe kind of they skim the headlines. Where is, I think the more information you consume, the more engaged you become, because that's how it worked for me anyway. But how do you get those people who, 50% came out for the mayoral election, and that's strong, right? So where's the other half of registered voters who have a giant stake in how the election turns out? Why aren't they showing up? And I don't think it's apathy. I think maybe for like 10% it's apathy, but I think it's a lack of awareness. I mean, you don't know about what the issues are. I mean, you don't know what the candidate platforms are. I think it's hard to motivate yourself to get off the sidelines or get out off the couch and go vote, because you don't know what you're voting for.
Well, I'm really interested in what Kim has to say, because I think there's an overlap, in the Venn diagram of people that do a lot of volunteering, like Kim, and people that are engaged in politics. I suspect, I don't know, that she probably does vote. Do you vote?
I do vote.
Okay, good. So I think there's an overlap there.
Right.
So I guess I'd like to know from Kim. I mean, how do you get more people involved in volunteer work? Because I really, although there's this adversarial thing about debating, otherwise, I think it's the same.
Yeah, the answer of getting people engaged is related on both, for sure.
Yeah. I want to answer the voting one, even though I'm not the political person.
No, go ahead.
I feel like people don't, to your point, go and vote because they don't feel like they have all the information. Like you said, they're not really informed, and they also I hear a lot of people say they don't think it'll make a difference, and which I always find interesting, because if a bunch of us vote, it does make a difference. But
Yeah, it was crazy because the Mayor Reardon won by like 12 votes or 20 votes.
Well, but even on the national level, like the election in 2000 in Florida for the presidency, I mean, could that have been any closer? How can you say your vote doesn't matter? I mean, I know it sounds kind of arbitrary. We have this system in America where you vote, and whoever gets more votes, controls all this stuff. It makes a difference. It may be kind of a weird concept rather than electing like a king, but it works for us, and you gotta pipe up.
Yeah.
Another thing, there was one of the counselors who's retiring, Counselor Preston. I heard her say at a talk, she was explaining how she got involved in local politics, because for many decades, she was a professional woman who was not involved in local politics, and what she said was, well, I kind of figured someone else was taking care of it. That's a paraphrase, but it's essentially right. I think she was living in Cambridge at the time, not in Newburyport per se. And maybe that's another thing, is that, maybe there's more people interested in getting into the state house or getting into Congress or running for president because, I don't know, there's glamour and money and I don't know what. But there isn't necessarily anyone taking care of it in Newburyport. If you are concerned about something, don't just assume it's being taken care of.
Yeah.
Right.
You need to make sure you are voting for someone or doing it yourself.
There are also four city council seats are running uncontested this time around. So those are 4 seats that the residents of those wards have no say in who their elected representative is, because only one person decided to run. They've got that person for better or worse. Even with a second option, they're still able to, they're presented with a choice, which is a key point of what democracy is.
But still nobody steps up in those wards.
Exactly,
Right?
and I find it so insane to think that there's no second person in any of these wards just
Yeah,
run
I mean,
for
I
office.
remember the debate over term limits, 20, 30 years ago. And so I wouldn't say necessarily that you always should have it contested. It's possible that, enough people are essentially happy with their counselor.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
But the problem is there may not be enough people that are paying attention to really say that it's a majority of people. What I do think is a problem is when you have an election where no seat is contested, that's not a good sign.
Right.
That's not a good sign. That's an apathy that is self-destructive,
And you think that's a community type of thing, or do you think that was coming from the council, like in terms of like nobody wanted to oppose what? I don't know.
I think it's a national thing. I think it's Newburyport reflecting a national trend where we're so bombarded that the prioritization of where people are putting their attention may be off.
Yeah,
And
I
that
agree with that.
everything fell the wrong way that year in 2021, where
Well, that was a tough
no
year.
seat was contested, and that shouldn't happen.
So
That
where are
can't-
people putting their attention, do you think?
Well, I mean, some of it, I'm not judging, people. Some of it is worthwhile, like, they're upset about an international issue or a national issue, which is important to
So
human,
local stuff seems
humankind.
insignificant, do you think?
Yeah, but
That was also during COVID, so.
yeah, and also COVID, there have been, but I think computers are a real problem, and smartphones, and, just the way people interact or fail to interact with their own neighbors. And I'm not saying you must go interact with your
Yeah.
neighbors. I'm just saying the pendulum is a little too far one way, where we think we can just sort of ignore each other, and you really can't.
Yeah, which is funny because you think with the advent of the internet and smartphones, you'd have more access to information
And it's been the opposite.
and you'd be more engaged.
Yeah.
And you had more awareness.
They're not
and it
looking at
feels-
that information.
Right.
Like
So you
scrolling
can
up.
find the daily news. You can scroll it on your phone. You don't even have to get the physical paper.
Yeah.
And you'd think that more, as someone who's not involved in politics directly, but is generally aware of what's going on, how do you stay kind of aware of civic life, I guess?
I ask you usually. I actually get the physical paper on my doorstep and
Yes,
look
just
at it.
reading the
Just-
paper.
I like to read the
Okay.
paper, but
So I'm curious because that's someone who doesn't go to all the meetings and you're not reading all the newsletters, but you're still engaged and aware. That's, I think, where most people hopefully would fall. People who care and are aware of a little bit, but they're not attending every single meeting.
Right.
So I'm just curious, where
Yeah.
how do you kind of stay abreast of what's going on?
I definitely get some of the newsletters and I read them
Yeah.
when I have time. But I think it's a time issue for a lot.
It
I mean,
is,
I'm
yeah.
interested in all the things.
When
I
you're
clicked
volunteering on every single board,
I know,
then
and
how
I
do you have the
clicked
time?
all of them, right? But I don't have time to read them
Yeah.
all. But I think that definitely when something pops up that seems like that sort of catches my eye, I'll go here some of that. But I don't follow it. I don't think anybody does.
Right.
Is able to follow all
Sure,
of the things,
yeah.
right? So
Stuff that strikes you personally. your
yeah,
personal
exactly.
interest.
I think that's important for most people. I think they'll definitely start listening to something that is of interest to them. I also think that if it's of interest to someone and if you ask somebody to do something, if you tell somebody about it, like you said, the neighbors not talking to each other. I moved 3 years ago, and my neighbors, I talked to all my neighbors, and they said they had never spoken to the person that was living in my house before that. Lived there for 2
Wow.
years. They said they never spoke. He never spoke to them, and I thought that was interesting because, I feel like I'm talking to my neighbors all the time. We're talking about the streets. We're talking about what's going on downtown and the political. I think that people don't go out and talk to people as much. People are more isolated, I think, now, and
They are.
and I think more since COVID. But in general, I think we're just getting to be more insular than we used to be, more community-based, like you're saying. There's the supper, the spaghetti dinner or whatever.
Yeah,
Everybody
yeah.
goes out
Yeah.
to it to socialize.
But it's little things too, because I think what one of the things I learned as a ward counselor, you're dealing with nuts and bolts thing. I mean, it's a daily job. It's not just you show up at the meetings, So for example, when there's a snow emergency, people living in your ward are calling you and saying, "Hey, how come the plow hasn't come?" So one of the things
really?
I discovered was, most people, because they're human beings, they have compassion and empathy for each other. They do. So if there's an elderly neighbor, for example, they're just not physically able to shovel their walk. The city actually has a program. Many people aren't aware of it, where there are plenty of volunteers. There are lots of teenage kids around who are like, I'll go shovel the guy's walk, but they're not talking to each other the way they would have, 30 years ago. And it's just kind of weird, because it's not that hard, because most people, like I say, it's no skin off their back to shovel a walk for someone who's elderly so they can stay in their house. Or, they don't want to deal with the trash cans. It's difficult when you're in your 80s. But
It's the connection to those people next door, though, that makes a difference, I think.
yeah,
if you
and
move them
you don't
and
have
go
to love them. You don't have to go to the same church that they do. That's not the point. It's just sort of just basic human stuff. And by not having that, people get so isolated in their own world. I don't know that it's making them happy. I mean, you would be better equipped to know that, but it's definitely not helpful for getting things done, and it's not a way for them to get what they want.
Right.
If you don't have any relationship, if you're just shunning everyone else and dealing with your own stuff, I mean, when something comes up that's important to you, how do you expect to be able to have traction for that?
Then you don't even have the
Right.
connection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So talk to your neighbors.
I know.
That's
Well, we all used to go out when it
solution,
snowed, right?
neighbors.
I grew up in
Yeah.
Maine, but it's a little different. But we would all go out. It snows, everybody's out. Everybody's shoveling. Everybody's helping everybody shovel and pushing people out of the street and everything. I don't see it as much anymore. But
Yeah.
I think people are busy. We talked about this at the beginning, and I think that part of the reason is that everything now seems so structured. All the families, there's so many activities, and families are so structured in their
That's definitely
activities,
true for kids. That's changed for
so
kids.
yes, I'll speak for for kids and families when parents of younger children are very involved, like in the elementary school, and as the kids get older and they start diversifying, like you're saying, they're on travel leagues now in middle school, so they're now in other towns and they don't even know some of the people on their leagues, and I think that people don't have time after that. Well, they're traveling all around doing all the things. People are very overcommitted, I think, in trying to build the resume for the kids, so they don't
Right.
have a lot of time to participate in the local stuff. We all used to be local. We didn't go to all these other schools and towns.
And now we're distracted. Our attention is being pulled in so many directions.
But it's also priority. That's true. It's absolutely true. We talked about it about sports leagues, especially for parents with kids. But they're still finding time for other stuff. I mean,
Yes, that's true.
they're still finding time to go out to dinner because they would go crazy otherwise. I guess I think it would be better for these families and better for Newburyport as a community if more people carved out a little bit of time, and didn't just say no, that's off my list entirely, because it's going to bite them in the end. It's going to bite them.
Yeah, I feel like people don't think they're qualified to and when you say like the board or city council, it feels like people don't feel like they have the skills or they don't know what they could contribute I think so. And I think so if you do more of a personal kind of a conversation with someone, just ask them to help out with something, like suddenly they realize it's not as as intimidating as it seems. But I do think it's the amount of time people have and the amount of commitment they can make to something. And
Yeah, we've been talking about this a little bit before Maeve gives me the warning light. I want to get into some solutions and resources for people who maybe want to get involved, and there is no silver bullet, but what can people do who want to become more aware of what's going on in town, in City Hall, and organizations they can get involved in, just some resources for them or strategies to be more active in the community.
Well, I mean, because I'm Gen Xer, I'm not a text guy as much as I'm an email person.
Yeah.
Emails get answered. So, for example, say you're musing about, well, I want to know, I'm not happy with the bullnose at Market Square. It's too dirty. They're not cleaning it. They're not emptying the barrels enough. It irritates me. There's actually someone you can email. You can email the ward counselor, for Ward 2. You should probably email a couple of people. And you're going to get a response, and that will be the beginning. So that's one. That's sort of that model.
I just want to add on to that. I feel like people should call and offer to do it personally.
Well, that's the other thing.
I feel like why not get involved and help with instead of complaining about them?
Well, but that's often the response I made when I was a city councilor. Is like, all right, here's our budget. Here's what we can really do. We're not loaded. We can't do everything. We've already staffed, this many guys to clean out the trash cans, and maybe we should work with the Chamber of Commerce because they have an interest of putting some money into making, and they do. They historically they do the flowers and so on. And I think that engaging in those conversations is that's one. Passively, just to know what's going on other than walking around and seeing the bullnose. The newsletters actually are whoever, and there's a bunch of them. There's not just one.
Like every department, every commission, whatever everybody has one.
Yeah, but also several activists in town, have blogs, and it doesn't mean that what they're writing is gospel, but it's how you're going to get more information, and it's probably worth, just having those emails come in. Think of all the junk emails you get from solicitations for businesses. you might want to subscribe to one of these too. If you don't want to read it, okay, fine. But sometimes you might, and you might hit on something that you didn't know about that you wish you did.
Yeah, I think that would be a good thing. There are a lot of publications that, like the Chamber of Commerce has a whole page for, like, there must be hundreds of them, charitable organizations on this page, and I don't remember what it's called, but there's a bunch of them on there. And we're on there. Port Youth and Rec is on there. But there's also other sites that compile that stuff, but I think part of the problem there is that those people are all volunteers too, right? And it becomes a full-time job, and so it's not updated correctly, so then people don't get the correct information in terms of looking out for like a place to volunteer. I think part of the problem, we have difficulty getting volunteers in all of the areas that we're working in. And I think part of that is that there are a lot of things, if you look up, like people say they don't really know where to volunteer or what to help, or they want to go do something, but they don't really know. There are literally thousands of organizations that need support, and so I think people really need to think about what they're really invested in. There's something out there for sure for people.
Yeah, I mean, I think with Google, it's not that hard. I mean, and my wife has been in volunteering for the park system for many years, and they've had cleanup days. You know, where the whole idea is that you can pitch in. We're understaffed at the city. I mean, they don't have an army of people on call to like clean up all the leaves and all. You know, they just don't. So if there's a neighborhood park that you use, you probably should show up for these cleanups. Many years nobody shows up. You know, it'll be my wife, and that's it.
You know, they show up for the Plum Island because people seem to be really committed to the fish. You know, to the.
Because there's a wildlife component.
Yes, there's a group of people that's very committed to.
But I don't think it's because people are bad and selfish. I think a lot of it is they think, well, someone else is taking care of it, but someone else is not taking care of it. And you know, you do one Google search and you find, like, you know, the Parks Conservancy or whatever, and you email somebody. Like Stacy McMillan, who Kim knows too, who's also on that group, and they're going to email you back and say, yeah, we'll put you on our mailing list. You know, if you have an hour to rake leaves, if you have 30 minutes to rake leaves, here's where you can go.
I think that's important for us to reach out to people and not ask for a small thing, you know, like ask your neighbor, can you come and help with this parks thing that's happening like locally, to try to get people to do the local sort of cleanups and issues that are going on. I think that a lot of times people need to, like, somebody to go with, you know, sometimes people don't just show up at something. So if you ask them for a small thing like that, like the Plum Island, the planter out on Plum Island, there's 3 people that maintain that all summer. They watered at certain days of the week, and so you just put a schedule together and water. If you ask your neighbor if they can do it on Friday morning, kind of thing, small of course, but
and there are success stories. I don't want to make it seem, I mean, it's not a great situation right now, but you know, local Boy Scouts have been known to help out Glee Woodworth, who's an activist very much involved in our cemeteries. Many of the cemeteries are city-owned, by the way. And again, we don't have the money or the resources for staff to take care of it. This is not, you know, a big operation we have. So we need the Boy Scouts to come, and they do, and they help, you know, put tombstones right.
Let's put those Boy Scouts to work, and they can how to do everything.
But it doesn't have to be Boy Scouts, in my point. I mean, most of the time,
these organized groups of people already that
and you just you need to, people can know that they can pitch in, because again, I believe, maybe I'm naive, and most people will if given the opportunity. It's not that big a deal,
right?
You know?
My friend's dad is a gardener, and he gardens for the library, just volunteers, and he keeps the garden outside, and he also does one on the rail trail, and just does
that makes an enormous difference. You know, I don't know how much time he's putting in.
A couple things.
You know, it's not like he's taking care of an acre. You know, it's just, but that makes an immediate, tangible difference for people's lives.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that the. I lost my train of thought. Shoot. I'm going to get it back though, because it was important. I think that the way for if people could. So like the high school, all the kids have 10 hours of volunteering they need to do. So there's, I don't know how many 100 kids times 10. Like, I don't know, like if we were being a little more strategic maybe and targeting, like, you know, like we have a golf tournament coming up, we're going to go talk to the golf group at the high school, you know, and try to see if they would, then they can do their hours. And I always wondered why, like, more companies didn't do things, and like, you know, if a company that is able to give all of their staff one day off as part of their package or something, and they could go volunteer, like we can promote this in the community, or does does the city ask for that type of thing? Like the different departments? I mean,
No, you're
they
putting your
need
finger
help?
on an important point, which is that we haven't really connected the dots. You know, because
think that's-
for example, we don't have an economic development director. The planning director serves in that role, but he has no time. There was back in the 70s when they were trying to rebirth the city from depression. They did have an economic development because they had money to pay that person. Well, we don't have that, so there hasn't been an effort to connect all the dots. I mean, let's take, for example, our tourism strategy. I mean, who's going to deny that it's in summertime, downtown businesses rely on tourists? These are out-of-towners mostly that are buying stuff. I don't think we really have a coherent, there's nothing I've ever seen to say, do we know who these tourists are? How are we targeting
Oh,
them?
we have no tourism board.
Yeah. So the connecting of dots hasn't happened.
Right.
Like reinventing the wheel all the time. It seems
Yeah.
like we're
Yeah,
always
no,
just
there's
trying to find a
something
new
to
shiny way
think
to get
about.
people to be interested in the thing and want to be involved.
But the pieces are there.
Yeah.
You know, the pieces are there, and but the dots have not been connected.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we do have to wrap up. They're going to
Sure.
boot me off the air. But I wish we could keep talking about this for a while. But a lot of good resources there, a lot of good information. So I hope everyone was taking notes. Thank you again for coming on, you guys, and for listening to Between the Lines.
Thank you.
Thanks also to Sarah Hayden, head of NCM Studios, and our producer, May Power. We will see you guys next month.
Thank you.
Thanks again.
Thanks.